Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Speakers for Schools broadcast that's being held in partnership with the Ulysses Trust. We're excited that you have been able to tune in and join us. Hopefully, you're looking forward to today. Of course, it being the 10th of October, we are celebrating World Mental Health Day today. So, hopefully, you're ready to kind of talk about it, listen about it, and really kind of think about mental health, as today is definitely the day to work towards destigmatizing and open the conversation with others around the topic. So, a few things to talk about before we get into today's session. As normal, it will last around about 45 minutes and will include a presentation from our guest speaker before we later move on to a student Q&A. Questions for our speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function that you'll find just underneath the stream on your screens. You might have to scroll down a little bit to be able to see this box. And sorry for those of you that are watching on the backup link for any reason, the Q&A box is only on our webpage. But if you would like to do any sort of questions, you can submit those via the email address, broadcast@speakersforschools.org, which is in the email that originally sent your link. If you email any questions there, we will be able to get those answered for you today as well. But that's only for those of you that are having to watch on the backup link. But the question and the Q&As are open now. They're going to remain open through the rest of the session. So please submit as many questions as you like in response to anything that's said today, as we love to hear from you and we love to get your questions answered when we can. Now, obviously, it is World Mental Health Day, and we have to be a little bit aware and just want to mention that there could potentially be some triggering topics today in the world of mental health. It can be quite sensitive and it's very individual to each of us. So I want you just to please be aware and to put your own mental health first. If you think talking about mental health, whether that's depression, anxiety, anything that can sort of impact your mental health might bring up today or might be triggered, just take yourself away. The recording will be available, so you can always have someone else watch it first. Just remember to kind of put yourself first and be aware of that. Okay, having said all that, we're moving on to today's main event. I'm going to introduce the wonderful Polly, who's worked with us loads and loads. You might have seen her on some of our broadcasts before. She is the CEO of the Ulysses Trust. So, everybody, please welcome Polly.
Thank you, Charlie. And good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased that you're here today on this very important mental health day. It's such an important topic, and you will hear from one of our amazing ambassadors who will talk through his own personal experience. So there'll be lots of things to think about, and as Charlie said, please put your questions in the box and we'll get through as many as we can. So the Ulysses Trust, today's presentation, it is about everybody and anybody who loves adventures, exploring new places, new opportunities, new experiences. But it is also for those of you who don't like new adventures, exploring new places and doing new things. If you're a little bit nervous about those sorts of things or a little bit anxious, this is the presentation for you to try and help with that. Confidence and resilience are literally born out of adventure and challenge, and even a small adventure can change your life. The Ulysses Trust supports all types of adventures and expeditions, from bronze level D&V expeditions all the way up to climbing Everest and crossing the Antarctic and everything in between. All of these adventures and opportunities are available to young people and adult volunteers through our cadet forces. So if there are any cadets out there, then of course you'll know a bit more about these opportunities. The Ulysses Trust gives money and advice and guidance and support to units who want to organise these sorts of expeditions and adventures. And we ensure that everybody and anybody can take part, regardless of background or circumstance. So Getting outside on challenging adventures is really, really good for your physical and your mental health and well-being, and it develops confidence and a resilience and helps people know who they are, and believe in themselves and achieve so much more. Next slide, please. So the Venturing Challenge, it's literally proven to help develop confidence and resilience. There's lots of scientific research out there. Challenge, by definition, pushes you a little bit outside of your comfort zones, but that is really where the magic happens. That's where you learn about who you are, you develop your values, and you find that there are endless possibilities, all of which you're capable of. You find courage, confidence, and belief in yourself. So it also teaches you life skills such as resourcefulness, risk awareness, all these things that cannot be taught inside a classroom. This is outdoors, and they're essential really to enable you to learn these sorts of life lessons. Most of all, it's about having fun, and you make lots of good friends as well. Next slide. So this is what we do. That's the Ulysses Trust. We support all of the cadets, the reserves, adult volunteers, wonderful adult volunteers that support these opportunities for young people. And we give advice as well as money. And next slide. And that's what we've done over the last 32 years. We've given away nearly £4 million to over 40,000 people and over 3,000 expeditions. And we are growing every year and supporting more and more people. Next slide. So the Ulysses Trust, we've got several ambassadors, all of them amazing, all passionate about helping young people and all passionate about the power of adventure and challenge and helping making people confident and resilient. So Jordan Wylie, he is a former soldier, he's an award-winning adventurer, a best-selling author, and he is the National Ambassador for the Army Cadet Force as well as the Ulysses Trust. And in 2023, he was awarded an MBE by His Majesty King Charles for services to charity and education, both here in the UK and overseas. You might know Jordan perhaps from being on the team of Hunters on Channel 4 and Celebrity Hunted. Jordan is full of energy, he's got inspiring messages, he has an infectious spirit for adventure, and he is definitely somebody who is going to help you today. He's going to talk to you about his own mental health and how adventure and challenge and the great outdoors helps him. But before he comes on screen, I believe he's going to show us a little video.
The adventurer, Jordan Wylie.
The man from Blackpool braving the elements.
A man attempting to set a world record.
Former soldier, Jordan Wylie.
I think you really have to believe in the power within you. And for all the young people out there, dream big, work hard, and never ever give up.
Jordan to HQ, over. You've been hunted. Both fugitives captured, over.
The fear of failure can be paralysing, but if you don't try, you will never know.
This is the real Afghanistan.
I'm here on the Horn of Africa.
We're here in the high Arctic. The next stop, hopefully, is the North Pole.
2.5 years ago, we made a promise to little Ibrahim and his friends here that we were going to build him a school. And we've just done it. How cool is that?
Embrace it, learn from it, and come back stronger and wiser. This is where the magic starts to happen, and we start to grow and evolve as individuals.
Be the difference that makes a difference.
Hello and good morning, everybody. On this 10th of October, World Mental Health Day 2024. My name's Jordan Wylie, and it's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to speak to you today. And a huge thank you to Charlie from Speakers for Schools and Polly from the Ulysses Trust for inviting me to share a bit about my journey with regards to adventure and mental health. I'm a professional adventurer. I'm very lucky to say that that's what I do for a living. So I spend a lot of time traveling and a lot of time in the outdoors. And as you would have just seen from the clip there, I also part of my life is working on a TV show called Hunted, which is quite fun actually, because I literally get to play hide and seek, and my playground is the whole of the United Kingdom. So it's a great show. If you've not seen it, there is a new series coming out soon. So a little plug there for the Hunted and Celebrity Hunted team. But what I would say is, especially for young people, we live in a world now that's probably a lot different than the one that I grew up in, where we're sort of immersed in what I call celebrity culture. And again, I don't tarnish everybody with the same brush, but if I'm really honest, I think there's a lot of very uninspiring people on TV. People who inspire me are the teachers, the people who are with you today, the nurses, the doctors, the soldiers, the people who make a genuine difference in their communities. Certainly not always celebrities or people on our TV screens. But what Hunted does do for me, which is important, is it gives me a little bit of profile to hopefully do some good in the world. And do things like this, like speak to people like yourselves as well, and share some of the lessons that I've learned. And I've had lots of amazing opportunities over the year. I've worked on Hollywood films. I've worked on, as I say, television in the UK, and I've traveled to all 7 continents as an adventurer, and been very lucky to be part of incredible expedition teams that have set world records and carried out world firsts. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those things today. But for me, one of my values as an Army Cadet National Ambassador, one of my values is integrity and being honest. So I'm going to tell you everything about me in terms of where I started, the challenges I faced, because it's not all been, as I say, Hollywood films and BAFTA awards and that sort of thing. It's been pretty dark and pretty bleak at times. And I want to take you back to when I was your age, in fact, because again, being very transparent and very honest, my journey started in a pretty not so nice place, as you can see on the screen there. That picture on the screen is actually a picture from Blackpool Central Police Station. As you might have guessed from my accent, I'm from a place called Lancashire, up in the northwest of England. And unfortunately, just before my 15th birthday, I spent a night in this particular cell that you can see on the screen. And I tell you that not because I'm proud of it. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm extremely ashamed of that. But I learned a lesson very early on at 15 years of age in that cell. You know, I was arrested at the time and given a caution for antisocial behavior. I was basically being a nuisance. I was up to no good on the park. And again, embarrassed to say that I was drinking alcohol. I'd smashed a window and I was arrested. And again, not proud of that at all. In fact, very embarrassed, as I say, but important to tell you that. Because when I was in that cell, I remember very vividly the custody sergeant on the desk that night. He rang my father, who was a former Royal Marine Commando, a veteran of the Falklands, and he said, "Mr. Wylie, I've got your son here again in my police station. What do you want us to do with him?" And I couldn't believe what my dad said. He said, "You can leave him there and he can learn a lesson the hard way." And they left me in there for the best part of 48 hours. And I remember going from this really cheeky, naughty, bit of a Jack the Lad, bit cocky teenager at 15 to a very lonely, sad, emotional little boy. And I was lying on that bed, and I remember thinking, I could hear people coming in, adults who'd been arrested for different crimes, and it sounded, you know, really brutal and horrible outside that cell. And I thought to myself, I never want to end up in one of these places ever again. And I'm proud to say, touch wood, that I've never been back to one of those places. And I learned that lesson the hard way. But it was an important lesson for me because it showed me what I didn't want to, or how I didn't want to end up in my life. But unfortunately, in that same period of my life, much like many of you now will be still in the sort of educational years of your development, you know, you'll be at school for the next couple of years, I'm sure most of you, or hopefully maybe in further education of some sort. For me, I was a terrible student at school. And again, I realize I'm speaking to lots of people who are in schools right now and teachers who are listening, but I really was a teacher's worst nightmare. I didn't apply myself. I was disruptive in class. And yeah, I was terrible. And when I look back, I'm so embarrassed to realize to think about how I was as a student. I just wanted to be outside, and anything else didn't really matter to me. I just wanted to play football or be out in, you know, climbing trees, camping, making a den, or whatever it might be in those days. And unfortunately, as a result of me not applying myself in school, I left with no qualifications, no GCSEs, which was tragic, as I came to learn later in life. And When I left school at 16, the opportunities were very few and far between. One, I had a criminal record, and two, I had no education, no qualifications, and that meant that life was going to be challenging, believe it or not. And life was very challenging for the years that followed. And unfortunately for me, I couldn't find any work or employment opportunities. The colleges wouldn't have a look at me, and I couldn't do any of the courses I want to do at college because I would have had to go back to school and do my education. And I wasn't willing to do that at the time because I had a terrible attitude, if the truth be told. I was very lucky that at 16 years old, the British Army gave me an opportunity. The British Army, where I spent the next 10 years in a tank regiment. And what I learned actually was there are only a couple of jobs that you can do in the army that will take you with no qualifications. And both of those jobs involve fighting for your country on the front line in a combat role where your job is to fight and to defend and to destroy or whatever it might be in a conflict environment. And those two jobs are the infantry and the Royal Armoured Corps. The infantry is like the foot soldiers, if you like, and the Armoured Corps is as you can see on the screen there, hopefully, the tanks, the armour, the firepower of the military. And I spent 10 years in a main battle tank regiment. And what I learned there was something that I never had as a teenager or as a young teenager. And they're something that I live and breathe by still today. They're what we call values. Some of you in your own schools or organizations that are listening right now, you might have your own values as individuals. You might have your own values as a school or a college. And what I can absolutely promise you is if you take those words that might be on the walls in your corridors or in assembly halls or wherever they might be, and you start to embed them in your lives, not just treat them as hearsay and words that are on the wall, actually start to understand them and live by them, they will change your life. I absolutely promise you that. And I've learned that the hard way. And in the military and also in the Army Cadets and certainly in the Ulysses Trust, we live by what we call our core values, which are things like courage, respect for others, integrity, loyalty, discipline, and selfless commitment. And by holding ourselves accountable to those values, we are able to make the right decisions. It doesn't mean we're always going to be right or get things right, but it means even when we don't get things right, we're able to learn and bring ourselves back on track quite quickly. I certainly don't get everything right. I get lots of things wrong and continue to fail in many areas, but I'm always learning and I'm always open to improving and growing. As you can imagine, when your job is as a frontline soldier, unfortunately, when the worst happens, you have to go to war or conflict and you spend a lot of time away from your family. You see some pretty horrible things, pretty horrific things that shape you as a person. And I just want to share an image, actually, because I share this image with everybody that I speak to. And thank you. I thank you in advance for letting me share this image, because this is 8 friends of mine who tragically never came home from conflict zones around the world. These are 8 people who are colleagues, friends, heroes. In fact, they're heroes. And I made a promise to their families that I would never let their memories be forgotten. So if I ever talk to anyone, I always share their faces. So just a small thank you for letting me do that today. But when I was serving overseas in the military, in the army, in Iraq, especially on my first tour, we had a really tough time, and we lost some good people, some great people, some good friends. And it was very difficult to deal with that at the time, and something that I still think about on a daily basis. But one of the things that really stood out to me when I was in Iraq, I was probably 19, 20 years old. So maybe same age as some of you people listening. And I was on a patrol one day, a bit like the one you can see on the screen there. I was in a Land Rover, and I was in the front vehicle. And we were patrolling along to a meeting out in the Iraqi desert. And as I was patrolling down this main road in my vehicle, we stumbled across what we thought was a group of children at the side of the road. And if you can imagine 100 meters ahead, you're going down this dusty road, a bit like on the screen, and you see a group of children on this busy road. You think to yourself, something isn't quite right here. Something's not right. And as a soldier in a military environment, you're always looking for a presence of the abnormal, a change in the pattern of life, something that doesn't seem quite right or you can't put your finger on, because that's normally an indication that there's a threat of some sort. And as I got closer to these children, I realized that I thought maybe there's an ambush here. Maybe those kids are out in the road to slow us down, and then the bad guys are going to get us. And I got a little bit closer, 50 meters or so. And I remember thinking, no, these kids are just playing or something. They're not here to hurt us. And then when we arrived at the actual scene where the kids were at the side of the road, we realized that actually they weren't a threat to us and they weren't playing. These kids were actually in great distress. And they were all young as well, under 11 years old, I would say. And tragically, one of them had inadvertently stepped on a roadside bomb, or what we call an IED, an improvised explosive device. And tragically, a little boy on that occasion, he lost his life. He'd lost his leg clean off at the hip, and he'd had what we call in the military a catastrophic bleed. He'd hemorrhaged a lot of blood, and he'd lost so much blood that he sadly died while we were there in our arms, so to speak. And even talking about that actually makes me feel quite emotional still, because the memory is still very vivid in my mind when I talk about that. And I tell you that story because on the way back to camp, we went back to camp that afternoon, and I remember my interpreter, who was a local Iraqi gentleman. I said to him, I made a throwaway comment, and I said, what were these kids doing playing on this busy road? Why were they in that area anyway? Why were they not at school? And this gentleman, he grabbed me round the neck, this Iraqi interpreter, and he looked at me in such disgust and disdain, and he said, Jordan, there is no school for these kids. It's not like where you come from back in the UK, in the West, or America, or anywhere like that. There is no school here for them. And even if there was a school, these kids wouldn't be able to afford to go to school. And it was the first time in my life that I realized, wow, I thought, I got the chance to go to school and I didn't even take that opportunity. I had so many opportunities at school. And I came from a very humble beginning. I grew up on a council estate in Blackpool, one of the largest council estates in Lancashire. And we wasn't certainly have a lot of money or anything like that. But whatever I would have lacked materially, I had in love and support from my family. And I realized at that moment, and it took me 19 years of my life to realize that school and education was one of the greatest gifts that you can ever have. And you will have heard adults, I'm sure, say to you, the school days are the most important days of your life. And, you'd have probably said, okay, yeah, whatever. And you'd have sort of palmed it off, because I used to do that. But I can absolutely promise you, they're not lying to you. It is one of the greatest gifts on the planet to be able to go to school and have access to opportunities and education. And not only that, it will also lead on to bigger and better things in your life. I absolutely assure you. I want to show you this image. I just put together a collection of different images from my life journey. This is a school actually in northern Iraq. This was after the Islamic State, or ISIS, as we would have known them a few years ago, had finished with it. Lots of children were tragically killed. Lots of teachers, females, were tragically killed. And this is a reality for some people who go to school in the world. Something that I'm very passionate about is helping children in conflict zones in particular. And just on the other side of that as well, I show you another image, because I think images are very powerful at telling stories. This image here is from central Afghanistan when I was there in 2018. And this image actually is a picture of, it was taken by a New York Times journalist, and he caught the moment that these children had seen a pen and paper for the first time. And all I did was I took this notepad that you can see in my hand there out of my rucksack. I drew a picture on it of the sun, and I pointed to the sky, and this was their reaction. And I couldn't get over why they were so excited and laughing about this picture of the sun. I thought, well, it's just something so simple. And then these 38 orphans who were living actually in a cave that's behind me, you can just see the door on the side of this mountain. They were all living in a cave. And the teacher told me that they'd never used a pen and paper. They used slate and stone. And again, it just made me think about how simple things in our lives, in our schools, in our daily lives as adults, we take for granted. Something so simple like a pen and paper. And yet this was the first time these kids had seen that in their lifetimes. I told you at the start that I was very embarrassed that I'd left school without any qualifications, but something that I'm incredibly proud of, is that I went back to school as an adult. And I always be very honest, and sometimes a bit too honest and direct, but I can promise you that when you have to go back to school as an adult, it's not fun. One, it costs a lot of money, and you have to pay for that money out of your hard-earned wages that you've worked for all week. And two, when all your friends are out, watching the football or down at the pub or whatever they're doing to have fun, you have to be studying, and that is not fun. I can absolutely assure you. But for me, I had to go back to school as an adult because I didn't take the opportunities when I was 16, 17, 18, or even younger. I didn't apply myself. So I had to go back to school. I did all my GCSEs at night school at a local college down in Wiltshire in Salisbury. I did my A-levels. I did a foundation degree. I did a bachelor's degree and even did a master's degree. And it was quite interesting for me. And I'm very proud of that because I'm still that, inside, I'm still that naughty young little boy who was in that prison cell at 15 years old with no qualifications and no real outlook on or no light at the end of my tunnel in life. And for me, it just shows you that you can achieve absolutely anything you want. You don't have to be the brightest, the strongest, the fittest, the fastest, or the best at anything you do, but you have to have the right attitude and you have to be willing to put in the hard yards. And I often meet people from all walks of life that have a bit of a victim mentality where they think they've maybe been a bit hard done by or they've not had the best start in life. But I can absolutely assure you, it doesn't matter where you start in life. It's about your attitude and where you're going in life and where you finish. And if you're willing to apply yourself and if you're willing to put in the hard yards, you can absolutely achieve anything you want in this world. And it's not a cliche to say that. It's a matter of fact. I truly mean that. For me, being a former soldier and spending a lot of my professional life, I left the army 14 years ago now, 15 years ago this year. And I spent 10 years in the army, but I spent the last 15 years as an adventurer, and I do quite extreme adventures around the world, and I touch on some of those in a moment. But for me, I've spent a lot of time in conflict environments, whether it's been as a volunteer, as a humanitarian, trying to help children in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, the Ukraine more recently. And I spent a lot of time away from my family. And unfortunately, that took its toll a few years back, about 7 or 8 years ago, on my mental health and well-being. And you can see on the image there some of the challenges that I've faced in my life. I think one of the biggest challenges, being very honest, was that I broke up with the mother of my daughter a long time ago, 10 years ago now. But it really cut me deep that I don't get to see my daughter every day. And certainly that some of you may be able to resonate with this and relate to this, that, you might not see one of your parents or both of your parents as much as you would like. And certainly from as a father who doesn't see his daughter every day, and there's a man in my ex-partner's life who does see her every day, and that's still quite hard for me to accept. And that really played with my mental well-being. It made me very depressed. It made me very anxious. And it put me on the verge of a breakdown. In fact, I had a breakdown and ended up in the hospital as a result of that. And there's been lots of other challenges with sort of neurodiversity. I was diagnosed with ADHD. I've diagnosed with epilepsy in the last 5 years as well. So lots of challenges and lots of adversity to face, certainly in my life. And many of you will have experienced some of these things, like anxiety. It might be about issues at home with family. It might be about exams that you're taking soon. And anxiety is something it's very difficult to explain what it is and to quantify it. But I can absolutely assure you it's one of the most challenging and debilitating mental health sort of issues that I face. And I'm someone who's, as I say, I spent 25 years of my life as a combat soldier and an extreme adventurer. So a lot of people perceive me to be quite rough and ready, quite tough, but I have as many challenges as anybody going on inside my head. And I just want to pull up actually on the slide some of the signs and symptoms, because these are the things that I've experienced, and some of them may resonate with you too. When I'm having a bad day, I just want to be left alone. As it says there, I want to stay in bed. I don't want to get out. I have that victim mentality, what I talked about earlier, where I think the world's a bit against me and I don't know why, even though it's not. It's just all in my head. I can be quite emotional as well. I have a little cry to myself. I'm not ashamed to say that. My sleep is disturbed and disrupted. My concentration is affected. And I'm just going to show you a video in a second. And I feel quite vulnerable actually sharing this video. But when I've spoken in schools over the last few years, young people, children, cadets ask me what anxiety feels like. And some of you will already experienced it. But for those that don't, I play you this video just to give you a little insight into what it feels like.
It's Tuesday, the 9th of July, 2024. Oh, terrible anxiety today. Don't want to get out of bed. Don't really know why. Just feel like the world's against me. I'm recording this video so I can use it in a presentation, because it's very hard when people ask me what anxiety feels like. It's like being suffocated. You can't breathe. It's like debilitating. It's like somebody's pinning you down and holding your chest. Oh, it's horrible. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Oh, goodness me.
Me having, I guess what you would call an anxiety attack of some sort, and that's something that I often happens to me, to be very honest. I don't feel like that at the moment. I feel great at the moment. I feel that when I don't even recognize that person, if I'm completely honest, but then that will happen to me certainly a couple of times a month, and it's something that I take medication for on a regular basis. But what I would absolutely say is that the best medication in the world that I found that beats anything that the sort of the doctors or the pharmacists will give you is the nature and the outdoors. It's about being active. It's about getting outside. You know, I call it blue therapy and green therapy, being in the ocean or being in the nature, in the forest, in the countryside, and doing some physical exercise, because that is always the best medicine for me, to be very honest. But I've just put on the screen there some other things that may be useful. Oh, sorry, I don't. There we go. Talking and connecting with people, you know, letting people know about your challenges and your problems that you might be facing or experiencing. Living in the present moment as well is really important, because we're often glued to our screens these days, where we're constantly comparing our lives or thinking about what we should be doing. Writing down your thoughts again is a good one. How you're feeling, doing a lot of blogging and journaling. You don't even have to share them with people, but I find that writing my thoughts and feelings down is very helpful. For me, I've realized that I need a sense of purpose. I need a sense of trying to help people or try to be better. That gives me a lot of self-worth and satisfaction, and is great. And sometimes we might need medical and professional help too, because it's something that I certainly needed help with, and continue to do therapy and things. And again, I'm not embarrassed to say that, because it helps me a lot. And if it helps me, maybe it will help some of you guys out there. I want to fly through some of my adventures, because they are the things that excite me. They're the things that give me a lot of pride and purpose, and they get me outside and they get me active. So I'm just going to flick through some of my adventures here, because one of the adventures is one of the themes of the day. So one of the things I love doing is going to places that a lot of people perhaps perceive to be not very nice or too dangerous for whatever reason. And I spend a lot of time going to places that people find quite strange. But for me, places like Afghanistan, as you can see there, that was where I ran my first marathon. Amazing people in Afghanistan, an amazing country. And for anybody who's ever done a marathon or thinking about doing the London Marathon and can't get a place, I can promise you there's always places available in the Afghanistan Marathon. I realized that when I was number 3 on my bib number 3. I was number 6 in Somalia, as you can see on the image there as well. But war zones and conflict zones, they often get a lot of negativity, as you would imagine. But I've met some of the kindest people in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, amazing people. And sometimes I believe the kindness that I've found in those countries is often more than I've seen in our own country, which is crazy, really. Another expedition I did was a rowing expedition from the Horn of Africa to the Middle East and back across a dangerous stretch of water, as you can see on the image there. I love that mountain. It's a place called Rasayan off the Horn of Africa, and it's a bit like a shark's fin, an amazing place. And there is actually sharks in the waters there, which I had to be careful with. But I tell you about that particular expedition because it was where I met this amazing little boy called Ibrahim. And Ibrahim had tragically... his family had been moved from the Somalia region into the Horn of Africa to a place called Djibouti. And when I met little Ibrahim, like I would with a lot of young people and children, I would say to him, what do you want to do when you're older? And Ibrahim's story, he told me, is that he wanted to go to school one day. And it took me back to when I was in that prison cell when he told me that. And it took me back to when I was in Iraq and we lost that little boy in our arms. And it took me back to me being naughty as a kid. And I thought, I can help this little boy. I can do some good in the world and try and help this little boy. So I made a promise to Ibrahim to that I would try and build him a school. And I spent the next 5 years trying to do that. And that was the all my fundraising adventures took me on this journey to try and build a school on the Horn of Africa. So this was the piece of land that I was given from the president of the country and the minister of education. And I needed to raise about 350,000 to build this school. So when I came back to the UK, I had to come up with another wacky adventure. You know, I've run through conflict zones. I've done lots of mountaineering, lots of parachuting, but I needed something that was going to capture the imagination of the British people to support me on my fundraising journey. So I came up with this idea called Running Dangerously, the Polar Edition, where I would run a marathon in the 10 coldest places on the planet, including Antarctica and the North Pole, and everywhere in between. And you can see on the image here, it's quite a beautiful image there. That is actually in northern Canada, in the Yukon territories, which was actually the coldest place on Earth on this particular day, nearly -60 with wind chill, much colder than Antarctica when I went there. Incredible journey, though. And this was another image there from Iceland, not the supermarket, of course. Me and my dad jokes. This is Iceland, and one of the things I really love about these expeditions is the nature. You can see the reindeers here. You know, running alongside them was just majestic, beautiful, and again, amazing for your mental well-being, being immersed in the natural world. And then the great privilege, of course, of going to Antarctica. Going to the coldest, the windiest, the highest, the driest continent on the planet. You know, less than 0.001% of the world will ever go there. So to run a marathon there was a great honor and a great privilege. And I hope one day that I'll get to go back there too. I'd done 9 marathons out of the 10, and then unfortunately we went into lockdown, and as a result I couldn't travel any further. So while I was in lockdown, I was getting quite low with my mental health, to be very honest, very depressed, and it really exasperated everything. And I thought I need to be outside more. And when the lockdown restrictions were lifted, I thought I still had to raise 100,000. So I'd raised about $250,000. So I needed to raise 100,000, and I needed something new because we weren't allowed to fly anywhere. So I couldn't go to the North Pole. And I tried to get there several years in a row, and COVID had stopped it. So I thought, what can I do that allows me to be socially distanced and I can't fly anywhere? So I came up with this wacky idea that I'm going to try and be the first person to paddleboard around Great Britain. And it was one of the most incredible adventures that I'd ever been on. There is a little video, but we were a bit tight on time and I want to get through a few other things. So I'm not going to play the video about the paddle journey, but I'm going to show you the route that I took. This is the route. And as you can see there, I did all the bottom of the UK, all the left of the UK, including paddling across the Irish Sea twice. I got up to Scotland, to Cape Wrath, the top left of Scotland, and I turned right after paddling for 3 months north. I turned right, and unfortunately, the whole UK went into a lockdown again. And I'd paddled for 149 days at that point on the ocean, sleeping on beaches, eating out of ration packs. And after 5 months of paddling, when I got told to go home, I was so sad and so disappointed. It was really tough for me to accept, to be very honest. And for those of you who like data and statistics, there's a few interesting facts about that journey. 5 countries paddled through, 93 dolphins I counted, only 1 shark off South Wales, over 1 million calories consumed. I could literally eat a Big Mac meal every day if I wanted to, although I don't recommend that. My longest paddle was 17 hours, 46 minutes, and that was from Northern Ireland, from a place called Bangor to the Mull of Kintyre in Scotland. And as you can see, we raised 108,000. So we raised the final 100,000, which was amazing to do, a real privilege. And when I got off the paddleboard on the last day, I didn't look like this, as you can imagine, where I'm sort of clean shaven. I was actually being trolled on social media. And you might be a bit young to remember this, some of you, but your teachers certainly remember this. Around Christmas time, you see a film called Home Alone, often on the TV. And apparently I look like Marv from Home Alone. So here's a picture of me looking like Marv. And that's me on the left of the screen there. Obviously, hopefully I don't look like that now, but that's what 5 months on the ocean does to you. It was pretty brutal at times. But most importantly is we got to finish and build that school. And there is the school when it got opened. And even more important than that, I was able to keep my little promise to Ibrahim. And there he is a few years later, and he's actually a lot older now. That picture was taken in 2021, which was amazing. And the purpose that gave me was immense. You know, to have that drive for so long, it was so good for my mental health. And the moment I stopped working towards that big goal, my mental health dipped again. So for me as an adventurer, I always need to be working towards the next project. And just to fly through quickly, because I'm conscious of time, my most recent project was actually one called Tower Power. Some of you may have seen this. A lot of schools across the UK were involved. And Tower Power was an eco triathlon because I learned through the outdoors and I didn't know a lot about the green environment. I didn't know a lot about sustainability and being eco-friendly. So for me to learn about it, I created an expedition. And I wanted to do something special for my hometown of Blackpool, because this little boy, some of you may recognize, is a little boy called Jordan Banks, who tragically lost his life about just over 3 years ago on a football pitch when he was struck by lightning. And little Jordan is a good friend of mine's son. And I wanted to do something to remember Jordan by in Blackpool. So I did this adventure in memory of little Jordan. And I did it in the most sustainable way possible. And you can see that's how I lived for a month on my bike with all my food and my bedroom, if you like, my tent. And it was amazing. And I went from the Leaning Tower of Pisa to the Eiffel Tower to Blackpool Tower. And everything was sustainable, even crossing the English Channel in my boat that is made from recycled plastic bottles or repurposed plastic bottles. Underneath that old bit of plastic there is lots of Coca-Cola bottles and Fantas and Sprites that have been collected by children. So it was amazing to get across the channel in something that was completely sustainable. And then I arrived in Blackpool, and lots of people came out to see me, which was amazing 31 days later, which was really great for my mental health and well-being. And just to show you, there you go. You can't see it. Actually, I forgot there's a little video there, but you can see where I started and where I would have got to was obviously back in Blackpool in my hometown. And this was the memorial we revealed in Blackpool at the football club for little Jordan Banks, which is amazing. And we're really proud of that piece of artwork there. And lots of people, if you ever go to Blackpool on your holidays, please do pop. It's opposite the football club in the car park, and it's something that we're super proud of. Again, going back to that purpose, having making a difference. And it's something that I know Jordan's family often go down on the weekends to have a walk by and just reflect on Jordan and him as his memory. Sorry. Just a couple of lessons before I finish and take some questions. The things that I've learned over my lifetime, especially through adventure and especially through facing adversity, especially when mental health's concerned, is first and foremost is to stay in the game. Whatever life's throwing at you, tomorrow is always a new day. You will always feel different when you've had a good night's sleep and you wake up. Sometimes it can take a few good nights' sleep. Sometimes it might take a few days, a few weeks, or a couple of months. It has done with me. But you've got to stay in the game. You've got to keep moving forward and stay positive. Your attitude is so important. Secondly, keep good company, especially those of you at school and in education still. Think about those that you surround yourself with. Are they a good influence? Are they having a good positive impact on your life? And vice versa, are you doing the same for them? Because there'll be people in your school who maybe aren't such good influences. Maybe they're fun to hang out with, but are they really doing you good in your life? Is your life being... Is it going to be better, or are you going to be wiser and smarter as a result of spending time with them? People say that you're a reflection of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think that's really true. And as you get older, you realize that's so important. You know, I'm really selective about who I let into my energy zone, because I want to have a positive impact on the world, and I want them to have a positive impact on my life too. And when I was at school, I thought I was, as I said earlier, I was a bit cocky, I was a bit naughty, I was disruptive, and I thought that was funny at the time. I realized that wasn't funny as I grew older, and I wish I'd learned that a long, long time ago. Never be afraid to fail. Never be afraid to fail. It's so important. We learn so much from failure, but back yourself, believe in yourself, give something a go if you get the opportunity. Opportunities don't come along all the time, so you have to grab them with both hands. You know, even if you might not think you're good enough to do something, give it a go. You'll learn so much from the experience. I absolutely promise you. I encourage you to fail. There's nothing wrong with failure, because it means you're trying and it means you're learning. But if you don't give something a go, that's when you should be scared. If you're not taking a chance, or you're not putting the effort in or backing yourself, that's when you have to worry about things. And finally, when things get really, really tough in your life, especially from a mental health perspective, I want you to remember why you started this journey. Whatever journey it is you're on, whether it's at home, whether it's in your sports teams, whether it's in school, in the classroom, education, exams, whatever challenge it is you're facing, you've got to go back to why you're doing what you do. And for me, that is often enough to keep you pushing forward. There was many days on that paddleboard when I wanted to quit, but I had to remember that promise that I made. There was many days when I was cycling across the whole of Europe from the 3 Towers that I wanted to sleep in a hotel, but I realized that I'd made a promise to little Jordan's family, and that was enough to keep me driving. When I have very dark days, I think about the people who I lost in the military. I think about what they would do to spend another day living and breathing with their families. And then I try to have a sense of gratitude and being grateful. That's really important to me. A lot of information there. You've been amazing. I'm sorry I haven't got a chance to see you in person. Hopefully I'll get to meet some of you in the future. But thank you very much for listening. I hope you can take something from my presentation. And I'm, of course, very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really great and some amazing sort of insights there. I can't imagine the paddleboard for that long. I mean, insane. So thank you for sharing that. It must have definitely been some experiences. We've got a few questions and we'll dive straight into them with this first one, which comes from Harris and Garrett Academy. And they've asked, how do you power through something like school / have the motivation when you're unsure about the future, which makes everything you feel you do like a waste of time?
Oof, very strong question, very powerful question, and a very good question too. I think, you know what I've learned in my life, and certainly as a soldier, I think, and being an adventurer on expeditions, is we shouldn't worry too much about being motivated every day, because we're humans. We're humans, and we cannot be motivated every day. People often think that I jump out of bed and I can't wait to tackle the day or go to the gym. Trust me, I have days like that every day when I sometimes think I really cannot be bothered today. But what I think is really important, one of the values that we use in the cadets, in the Ulysses Trust, in the British military, is a value called discipline. And discipline is about turning up and doing what needs to be done, even on the days when you don't really feel like it. We can't always be motivated because we're humans, but we can be disciplined. And I think we also have to not think too far into the future. I'm guilty of that as well, because without sounding too doomy and gloomy, we never know what the future is going to bring. And sometimes it's really positive and exciting things, and sometimes not so much. But we can't think too far ahead, because that, again, can lead to anxiety and worry about what's coming or what's not coming. So I think we have to live in the present moment as much as possible and be grateful for being in the moment. But I think don't worry too much about not being motivated every day, because the best of people in the world are not motivated every day. And if they tell you they are, they're absolutely lying. But we can be disciplined, and discipline is about getting into good habits. It's about forming good, positive habits, because then you do things even on the days when you can't be bothered. I'm an adventurer. Believe it or not, I hate gyms. I would much rather be outside. I hate going to the gyms, and people say to me, "Oh, I bet you're up at 6 a.m. going to the gym." I'm the last person who wants to get up at 6 a.m. and go to the gym. I'm never motivated for that. But sometimes I have to do it, even when I don't like it, because I know my body needs to be in the right condition to go to somewhere like Antarctica. But great question, and thank you.
Definitely. And really a good answer for motivation. You'd be surprised on the number of questions we've got in about motivation. I think that was about 1 of 6. So definitely lots of people out there that are figuring out, how do I stay motivated? And that's definitely a good answer. So this next question then, on a different stream, we'll go for a little bit of more of a light-hearted one, has come in anonymously. And it's, what has been your favorite adventure / place to visit?
Oh, what a great question. For me, my favorite place is actually the Horn of Africa. It's a place that I go back to every year. I actually leave to take another group of people, 12 adults actually, to visit the school that I just showed you. And I'm going to take them diving with whale sharks, the biggest fish in the ocean. And I head back there in about 20 days for a month. So the Horn of Africa, there's something about that place, that it's the simplicity of life, the values that the people hold. I sometimes think in the West and in this country, we're sometimes guilty of being very, what's the word, like materialistic. We think that having the shiniest, the biggest, the best is really important. And when you go to somewhere like the Horn of Africa, you get humbled very quickly. Often people who have the least are the happiest. You know, they're not driven by nice shiny things that are expensive. In fact, I'll tell you a funny line actually that was given to me about 10 years ago in Africa. I was waiting for a taxi driver in a place called Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, which is where I'm going again. And the taxi driver was late, and he said to me, when he arrived, I said, "What time do you call this?" As I did, as a typical British guy in a rush to get everywhere. And he said, "Jordan," he's an old man in a big white beard, and he said, "Jordan, let me tell you something." He said, in the UK, you have the watches, but in Africa, we have the time. And I thought, what a brilliant thing to say. It always makes me smile, that, because it's so true. But great question. Thank you.
I love it, definitely. And again, next question. This one comes in from Cockshut Hill Technology College, and they have asked, how does kind of sport, adventure, activity have an impact on the improvement of resilience?
Oh, great question. I think it's absolutely fundamental to building resilience, because often, especially adventure, adventure and sport, they have a lot of similarities, but they're also very different as well, I would say. If you think of sport is often, when I think of sport, and I love football, I love lots of sports, but when I think of a sport like you would in school, sport is often in a fixed environment with a set of rules. It's normally got a referee or an umpire, and there is normally a definitive time frame. Whereas when you compare that to adventure, there are often no rules. You don't know how long something's going to take. The risks are often higher because you're doing the risk management yourself, not relying on external personnel or anything. But I think both of them, they encourage competition, which means that it's encouraging you to want to be the best you can be as a person, as an individual. I think both of them can take you out of your comfort zone, which is often where the growth and the magic starts to happen. I purposely put myself in uncomfortable situations. I personally put myself, now and again, I'll go and sleep and wild camp for a night on my own in extreme conditions. And I know that makes me better. I know that makes me stronger, more resilient, wiser. The best piece of advice was given to me by an Olympic medalist many years ago called Alex Gregory, who's an Olympic rower. He won the double gold in Rio and London. And he said to me, "The best piece of advice I can give you, Jordan, is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you will really grow as a person." And I think it's true. It's so true.
Definitely. Without kind of stepping out your kind of comfort zone, you don't know, and you'll never grow. Whether that's public speaking or something else, it just depends on what that boundary is. And yeah, definitely agree.
And I think going back to that point in the presentation about daring to fail, when people, I'm intrigued by world firsts, and next year I'm trying to do a world first, and I launch it in January, so I won't say too much, but people say, well, it's not possible because it doesn't mean it's not possible because it's not been done. It just means that nobody's done it yet. And how do you break down barriers? How do you pioneer? How do you try and inspire other people? By giving it a go. And if you don't, if you don't get it right, or you fail, but you gave it a go, and the lessons that you will learn. I learned so much more from not paddling all the way around Great Britain than I probably would have if I'd have paddled around Great Britain, in terms of resilience built, in terms of disappointment, failure, wanting to and I believe that was probably the only expedition that I never finished, and it was probably the one that I believe I learned the most from in my life out of anything I've ever done.
I love it. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So we've had this question from South Essex College of Further and Higher Education, and they have asked, how do you cope with your own mental health after years of working within the public service?
Do you know, I'll be very honest. Of course, anything that you've experienced in your life will shape who you are and where you are and how you behave in things. But most of the challenges I believe that I face are the same challenges as that you will face. It's things like relationships. It's things like stress at work or at school. And a lot of those things, they're not necessarily linked to the military in any way. Of course, I actually am a big believer in what I would call post-traumatic growth. So where I've seen a lot of negative experience, where I've had a lot of negative experience, like seeing those young people die in conflict zones, where I've seen friends killed on operations, I truly believe that has empowered me and give me the focus to spend a lot of time helping charities, helping kids in war zones and conflict zones. And I attribute a lot of the hopefully good that I do in the world because of those experiences. So I'm a big believer that you will have heard this expression, that people say that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And I think it's true. I think it's really true in life. And some of you listening will have had challenges with your family. I'm sure families that have broken apart and it's been really difficult and really challenging. That's the kind of things that hurts me a lot more than the military sort of experiences. I'm quite a softie on the inside, and it's the things closer to home that hurt me more than anything.
Yeah. Okay. Again, final question now before we have to end today's session. We've had a question here come in from Sedgemore Manor. They say, thank you for today's presentation. And they've also asked, and I think it's a lovely little one to finish off, how many adventures have you had? I think this is in total, and it's
that's a great question. I love that question. That's a really brilliant question. And what I would say, I've of course lots of adventures, but I think what I would say is adventure is not a place that you go to or an activity that takes place. It's a state of mind. And I think you can be adventurous every day. And some of the best adventures that I've had have been in my back garden with my daughter and my dog. And you don't have to go to Antarctica. You've just got to have a spirit of adventure. And I think that spirit of adventure is sort of epitomized by never giving up, keeping going, whatever life is throwing at you. I think it's about taking a chance, taking a risk now and again. I think it's about believing in yourself and backing yourself, whatever it is you're going to do, believe that you can do it. And I think that's a spirit. It's not a place or a journey or a destination or a location. It's a spirit that you wake up with every day, and you want to try and find adventure in everything you do. But of course, travel and meeting new people. One of the best things about adventure is places and people. And it's a bit like holidays, I guess, in the sense that you could go to an amazing place, but if you're not with good people or the best people, you might have a bad time still. So I think it's about people, and having good relationships, positive relationships with people is the fabric of society. And it's what I said earlier about keep good company, because you can have the best times in your own villages and towns. You don't have to go to the other side of the world, and get outside. That's the most important thing. Get outside, because you never feel worse when you've spent a bit of time outside. That's for sure. You might feel tired. You might feel that you want to get in the shower because you've been for a run or whatever, but you never feel worse afterwards. That's an absolute fact.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is kind of the end of our time. So I want to say thank you for kind of joining us, Jordan. It's been wonderful having you on. Anything else as before we kind of send you away that you'd like to say?
On the spot now. I think one of the things people often ask me when especially in the education or schools and things, if they ask me for some piece of advice I could give, and I'm a simple guy from Blackpool, and I call it my ABC rule, and it's my sort of ABC rule to success in life. The A is for attitude. I think regardless of how good you are academically, regardless of how talented you are, how clever you are, what qualifications you've got, what experience you've got, if you've got the right attitude in life, you will always be given an opportunity, whether it's through teachers, whether it's through sports teams, whether it's through friends, business, work placements. Have the right attitude and you will go a long way, regardless of how well you do in other areas. I think B is, for me, is build relationships everywhere you go. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what opportunities lie ahead, and most opportunities come from meeting people. So always be open, have an open mind when you're meeting people. And C is about continued professional development. Not all classrooms have four walls. They're very important ones in schools, but you can also learn a lot as well from the natural world, the outdoors. So have an open mind. And again, I think that links into attitude. But it's been a real privilege to speak to you all today and to partner with Speakers for Schools and the Ulysses Trust. And feel free to follow us on social media. I have a new book coming out as well, a little plug there, on the 5th of November called Future Proof, which is specifically for teenagers. And again, I'll share some of those lessons in more detail in the book, which hopefully can help you. But thank you so much. I really, my passion is trying to help young people. So it's a real privilege to speak to you all.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's been wonderful having you on. Thank you. Just before we go today then, Polly, is there anything you would like to say as we say goodbye?
I know we're way out of time. I've got so many notes though. Jordan, you were absolutely spot on. Thank you so much. But I know we're out of time, but I've just really grateful. It was a fantastic presentation.
All right, everyone, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully it's been a lovely time for you to think about adventure, think about your mental health, and remember to take some time for yourself today and really evaluate yourself, see where you're at, and be proud of where you are, where you've come from at the moment. So thank you so much for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and fingers crossed, we'll hopefully see you next time. Thank you.